Today, let's make a standard gauge slouch hat for babies. This is very suitable for one bed machines, single bed machines, because we're going to use a reinforced mock rib hem. Mock rib is made by using every other needle. Normally, in order to get it to look tight and rib-like, we knit it at a very small stitch size. The problem with that for a hat is that it will make the head opening awfully tight and not very resilient. So for this project, we'll start with a really large stitch size and plan to insert elastic into the brim when it's completed. And that gets us the best of everything. It's nice and stretchy. It doesn't have to be really tight. You can use soft elastic, just slightly pulling it in. And although the large stitch size would render the mock rib floppy, it won't be because we have elastic helping it. This is also going to help us in creating the slouch shape. This hat is one of the 100 that I'm attempting to knit for charity this year using all recycled yarn. I unraveled samples that had been unused to make this pile of yarn, and we'll see if I can get the 100 hats that I like to donate to my favorite charity all out of this yarn. I'll put a link to the introductory video in the program notes in case you want to know more about this project. I'll be working on my Knit King AM3 machine. Here are some other similar machines. Knit King is like the Knitax line for some models and like the brother line for others. My AM3 is like a Knitax. Don't worry if your standard gauge machine is a completely different model. This pattern is so simple that anybody can use it. Aim for a gauge of 7 stitches 10 rows per inch using number 1 or 2 yarn. We will work across 100 needles and begin with an E-wrap cast on every other needle, leaving the alternates out of work. On the Knitax, I find it easier to use the double E-wrap cast on, so I'm doing that. You may use it on any standard gauge machine if you prefer the double E-wrap. If you prefer the single E, you may do that because it's not going to make any difference to the finished hat. It will look slightly different inside the hem, but there will be no functional difference. So one way or another, cast on across a span of 100 needles, but only using every other one. Now we'll knit the hem on every other needle. It may help you to get the first row knitted to bring the needles all the way forward and let the machine knit back from hold. Using double E-wrap, there is a true stitch on the needle, but it likes to unknit itself very easily, as mine just did there. If you used regular E-wrap, there isn't a true stitch, so either way it can be easier to knit back from hold. The odd little movement you saw is me fixing stitches that got disturbed. For this kind of machine, normal working position is what you see me placing the needles in now. Now at the largest stitch size available to us, we're going to knit 20 rows. During this movie, you'll see me hesitate at times and stop to adjust and lubricate. That's because this machine is just getting back to work after a rest, and it periodically needs a little TLC. This is my first real project since putting it back in service. Between each pair of needles is a strand of yarn, and we now lift that strand of yarn and hang it on the previously empty needles so that we truly have 100 in work. You can do this with your tool or with your fingertips, and you've seen me doing both. My hem is hung, and I have one sinker that likes to stick, so I'm doing a little lubricating and popping it back down, as I will need to do several times during the movie. Still at the largest stitch size, knit 10 rows. After hanging the hem, we'll knit a total of 56 rows, but reduce the stitch size one whole number every 10 rows. So reduce stitch size after row 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Stop at 55 and increase the stitch size to the largest possible again. Now you may either thread the main yarn tail, leaving it long of course, through the final row of stitches, and that's why we knitted it big, or you may do as I did and remove the entire hat onto waste yarn. Do not do any gathering yet, because at this point we want to insert elastic in the hem. The hem is double layered because we cast on, knit 20 rows, and then closed the hem, so it makes a great elastic casing. I used 1.5 inch soft elastic that's intended for sewn-in waistbands. And here's a little tip. You only need one safety pin to slide the elastic through, but putting a pin on both ends means that if you lose it, you can fix it. And because this is a loose-fitting casing, it is easy to lose it. Once it's all the way through, overlap your elastic in such a way that you just barely pull in the brim of the hat. You can tighten it to the exact measurement of the child's head if you have it available, or perhaps an inch smaller, up to an inch smaller. I don't believe in a lot of negative ease for babies. I think it's a little bit restrictive and possibly uncomfortable, and they wouldn't be able to tell us. So once it's overlapped, sew your layers of elastic together. I left quite a long overlap. You don't really need to leave that much, but a minimum of an inch. Sew the layers together at both ends of the overlap so there won't be any rolling up and making a mess inside the casing. Now seam the inside edges of the hem together using whatever method that you normally prefer. I chose here to use the sewing thread for the inner layer of the hem and to do the entire outer layer of the hat with the main yarn. It's a judgment call. The way I'm doing it creates slightly less bulk than using the main yarn for both layers would do. Now it's finally time to gather the hat crown. I used just a couple rows of waste yarn, so I'll need to do it carefully. Leaving a long main yarn tail at the end of the main knitting allows us to just use that tail to gather on. And I'm working that tail now through every one of the live final row of stitches, working in order and trying not to split any stitches or catch the waste yarn. When the yarn is threaded through all of the stitches, we can remove the waste yarn. You won't need to do this step at all if you lifted the stitches directly off of the machine onto the yarn tail. But we'll all want to pull the drawstring now, pull in the crown of the hat tightly, and stitch across it a couple of times. Then seam the two edges of the work together to complete the hat, including the outer layer of the hem if you didn't already close it. The slouch shape comes from having knitted more rows than it actually takes to get to the top of a baby's head. But we enhance the slouchiness by knitting loosely near the hem and gradually tightening towards the crown, as we did by adjusting stitch sizes. If you're looking for written machine knitted hat patterns, I have quite a lot of them on my website. They're on a couple of pages, and I will put links to those pages in the program notes, along with links to the other videos that I've mentioned that may help you.